Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, and welcome to our webinar on making Office 365 a reality. Sorry for the delay in starting. We had quite a few people who were struggling to join, but everyone seems to be here now, so we'll kick off. So the webinar is going to be hosted by myself. My name is Jonathan Otter, and my colleague Philippa Ritchie. So we work here at CPS in the business development team, and we're both specialists working on Office 365 and SharePoint. This particular webinar follows on from two others that we ran. So we ran one in January, which was about the why of Office 365, how to build a business case. We ran one in February, which was the what, so went into the detail of what Office 365 is made of. And then this is the third, and this is the how. So that we're going to give you some advice and tips on successfully implementing Office 365. So we've put together an agenda that we hope will be interesting and relevant. We'll have a few slides to introduce CPS for those of you who don't know us already. And then we're going to get into the meat of the webinar, which is looking at the strategy for implementing Office 365. How do you choose which of the products to implement first, advising you on how to work with Microsoft and partners, how to get the most out of we partners and Microsoft. We have some tips for you on implementing Office 365, and then Pip's going to be covering one of the very important topics that's often overlooked, and that's establishing a good governance framework. We'll conclude with a case study. We'll then take a look at next steps, and we'll have some time for Q&A. So we're aiming for the main content. We'll wrap up in about 30 minutes, and then there'll be some time for Q&A after that. If you do have any questions, please send them in to us via the comments window, and then we'll pick those up via Sorika, and he'll feed them through to us, and then we'll answer those at the end. So do keep those questions coming. Okay, so a little bit about CPS for those CPS, based here in Marlow, in Bucks, and we have a ton of customers across all kinds of different sectors and industries and organisations of all different shapes and sizes, from the very largest ones in the FTSE 100 down to the smallest organisations and also not-for-profits. A few facts and figures about us. So CPS in numbers, we've been in business for 21 years, and one of the things I really was that we cover here a broad range of the Microsoft technologies. So you can talk with us not just about SharePoint and Office 365, but also Dynamics CRM and PPM project server. So we believe we're one of the few partners with such a broad coverage, and that's great. So we can help you with integrating all those different products and workloads. A few of the customers that we've worked with in Office 365, so we've got lots of experience here, and so we've covered most of the scenarios and situations with Office 365, so we should be able to give you advice and information that's going to be useful to you. Okay, so we'll move on now, and we'll look at implementation strategy. So how do you choose which workload, which of the products to implement first? But before we jump into that, let's have a quick recap of what is Office 365. As we all know, Office 365 is a platform hosted by Microsoft, and it's also a collection of different products, some of which are available to you as in bundles. So Microsoft have bundles E1, E3, E5, etc. But also you can buy these products as add-ons to Office 365. And the licensing model is completely different to what we're used to. So there's an annual subscription instead of the 1 year and the EAs. So what is contained within Office 365? What's it made up of? Now, we covered this in depth in the last webinar, so we're not going to go into too much detail on this. This is just a recap. Basically, there's a broad range of different applications here, some of which you know and some of which you'll be less familiar with. So there's the main ones that we see are Exchange, Online, Office Pro Plus, which is your familiar Office desktop products, Word, Excel, PowerPoint, etc. Yammer, and then OneDrive for business and SharePoint for file storage and collaboration, etc. Plus some others that you may not know about, such as Sway, which is for publishing, Delve, which is for information discovery, and also others such as Power BI, which follows Microsoft's aim of providing decision-making tools for everybody and empowering everybody to make decisions and to explore and analyze data. So that's Office 365. So the question is, which workload, and each of those products is called a workload by Microsoft, which one to implement first? Well, the key point here is the implementation should always be phased. So avoid a big bang approach and choose your phased implementation based on a balance, finding the right balance between delivering a substantial amount of business value, but also without overwhelming introducing too much change. So which first? Which of the workloads to implement first? So we always recommend that you implement identity and security first. And why is that? Because that's going to be the foundation upon which all the other solutions depend. Once you've implemented your identity, so access and authentication, etc., and you've resolved all the issues of the various different domains that your organization may have, then you can start to implement the remaining workloads much more easily. You've got to get this right first before you start the others. So that's always the first thing. What you do next is really going to depend on your individual organization's IT or business requirements. And we covered this in depth in our webinar in January, and you can get a recording of that to know more about it. It's going to depend on your priority, and what we often see is that one of these two is implemented first. So Exchange is very common to implement first, and the other one is SharePoint or OneDrive, because they can provide business value for intranets and document management, etc. So it's usually those two, a choice of those two that is implemented first. What you do after that will then depend on the business priority. So it could be Yammer, could be Dell, could be Skype for Business. That's really going to depend on your business. Now, as a partner will be able to help you decide and prioritize on your strategy. I'm going to talk about that next. So implementing Office 365 is more than just switching on the products and expecting them to work straight away out of the box. There's a little bit more to it than that. So what can you expect of a partner to provide for you? Well, the first thing is design and planning. So i.e. working out and helping you decide on your strategy, and that's in terms of which workloads to implement first, working out what sort of skills and what are the prerequisites that you'll need to have in place before you can actually start work. It's helping you with your vision and roadmap for the future. So that is not just looking at the first phase, but looking at where you might be in 1 year's time, 2 years and 3 years, and making sure that all of the tasks are performed now to help you to implement your vision correctly and smoothly in the future. So as well as designing strategy, a good partner will be able to help you with the implementation and configuration of each of those solutions. So that's the actual work of configuring each of those workloads to meet your requirements. And part of this is working and collaborating with Microsoft. So you may have heard of Fast Track, and which we'll cover in just a moment. And a partner will be able to help you communicate and collaborate with the Microsoft team and getting the most out of Fast Track. So in our rush to implement Office 365, let's not forget existing content and data that will need to be migrated across from your existing systems, and a partner will be able to help you with your data and content migration strategies and possibly the implementation of those strategies, actually doing the work. And vitally, change management. Again, this is something that's often overlooked. in our enthusiasm to implement Office 365, and that is ensuring that as well as providing a technical solution, the user adoption is also taking into account the training and so on. And that all comes under the change management banner. So that's one of the things you get from a partner. And the last point here is coordinating with Microsoft actually on what your license requirements are. So your partner will be able to advise you and coordinate with Microsoft to make sure that the licenses you're buying are the ones that are appropriate for your business need, that you're not buying too much, that you're not buying them too early, and you've got them there exactly when you need them. So a partner will be able to help you with that. So that's a partner. Now what about Microsoft? What can they do? Well, obviously they're going to provide you with software, but they're also going to be able to help you through the use of the Fast Track Center. So the Fast Track Center is used to be called the Onboarding Center, and what they will do is actually do work for you free of charge to help you migrate onto Office 365. So the reason they're doing this is they clearly want to help organizations get onto Office 365 and to reduce any barriers to entry. So they provide a number of services. You can see them here. So they help with identity planning. They will do mailbox migrations, which can be a big task, and they're very happy to do that, as well as the migrations of SharePoint and OneDrive. Now these are, when we work with Microsoft, we ask them to do the mailbox migrations. SharePoint migrations and OneDrive is something that we usually do, because then we can actually work further with you and configure those solutions to meet the business needs. But those services are available, and as I mentioned earlier in this slide, we can coordinate with the Fast Track Center to help you get the most out of Microsoft. The last thing is, again, it's an indication of Microsoft's enthusiasm to help you get onto Office 365. They will provide funding. So there are various incentives available to new customers to help you get onto Office 365. Now, the availability of these does vary. It's not available for every customer. There are certain thresholds in terms of size, and the offers come and go. So some are available now, but they will, when the funds run out, they won't be available. So we, as partners, can help you access those funds and to get the most out of Microsoft. So I hope that's useful, gives you an idea of what you can expect from your partner and what you can expect from Microsoft. And I mentioned governance a bit earlier, so I'm going to ask Pip now to talk a little bit about that.
Thank you, Jonathan. So the governance is a really big piece. It's something that can't really be underestimated, but it's quite difficult to get it right. So there's a few little tips that we can run through to kind of help guide you of how that should work. So first off, there are many roles that need assigning. These roles are not full-time. They will vary in the amount of time that's needed for them based on the size of your organisation, how much content you have, and so on. But none of them are really full-time. And actually, one individual can do many roles. So it's not that you need to find a person for each of these roles. One person can do multiple ones. It depends on kind of finding the right people to adhere to them. And the roles that will be needed will depend on the workloads you roll out. So as Jonathan was saying earlier, if you start with a phased approach, you're going to start quite small. And then as you roll out additional workloads, you'll need to grow your governance framework. So the idea is to try and keep it as flexible as possible and allow it to grow and adapt over time. So looking at actually what the roles are and what's needed, you've got your overall Office 365 platform and kind of what's going to cover the managed under that high-level setup. So the sort of roles that we're talking about that will come under that governance area are people to look after the identity piece. So usually quite an IT-focused role. It's looking at the identity sync from your internal AD, making sure it's syncing up correctly, managing any issues. You've got looking at the licensing, so assigning licensing to people, making sure the right people have the right licenses assigned. Managing the workloads that you have turned on, looking at future workloads, and also managing new releases. So because Office 365 is this evergreen platform, it evolves over time. Excuse me. You will need to keep an eye on the new releases, looking at what's on the roadmap, making sure that you're rolling them out and able to kind of adapt as needed. And then you've got kind of the setup side, so the base configuration of the platform, managing growth, both in terms of users and content. So they're all kind of the roles that will come under the overall Office 365 heading. Then you've got the different workloads within that area, and I've picked three just as an example, but obviously there are many more. Sort of roles under Exchange, very similar to some of the Office 365 ones, but now focused on the mail side. So you've got your Exchange specific setup, and you've got the mailbox specific growth. So it's looking at kind of taking some of those areas from above, but making it very specific to the Exchange side. And then there's some things that are only relevant to Exchange, like the archiving, data loss prevention, and some of the mailbox security stuff. So kind of really looking at how the kind of the Exchange side works. Under SharePoint, again, very similar headings, but now specific to SharePoint. So looking at SharePoint security, the setup within that area, so the high-level setup, and how your SharePoint content is growing and making sure that you're not going crazy with it and kind of you're managing the retention. And then business, same sort of thing. So you can see that the pattern growing, they're just becoming very product specific. But it can go deeper than that. So if you take SharePoint as an example, within SharePoint, you might have multiple site collections. So these are kind of high-level hots for content. So one site collection might be for your intranet, another one might be for an extranet or a document management system. So you can actually start breaking out the content based on functionality, and then again start separating out the roles. So you've got different individuals who will manage both the growth, the security, and the features and functionality for that one little pot. So you can see how that kind of the mapping of roles will grow over time as you start bringing on additional kind of features and functionality. So what we really recommend is that you build what we term as a centre of excellence. This is the group of people who are involved in the governance. And really, if you want this to be successful and really take off and be well managed, is trying to set up regular meetings between everyone that's involved, maybe once a month, once a quarter, depending on your size and the rate of change. And then within those meetings, look at what future plans you have, kind of the business plans, the IT plans, look at any issues you're going to have in there. Do you need to increase or reduce the resource within your governance framework and how that's managed? Make sure you have a mix between both IT and business people in that group, because that's how you're going to really get the communication between the two working well. So if the business demands are saying you want to be able to work flexibly from home and so on, make sure IT know about that they know the business drivers and why it's important. And if there's any blockers, like any security issues or anything like that, then the business can be aware and they know why IT are kind of slowing things down. It's not just being difficult for difficult sake. It's also really good if you can have a mix of seniority, so you've got the high-level sponsors, but also some of the doers, and you kind of get that mix. But really stress trying to get the senior sponsorship involved, that you do have that involvement, that they're there, they're present, and they're kind of pushing this forward. And then if you've got SharePoint Online set up, make use of the SharePoint. Use that as your team site. You can have that as an area to collaborate. You can put your meeting minutes in there. You can have a Yammer group to share ideas. So use the tools you've got to do this. It's about the business. You can have the meetings remote, so people don't even need to be in the same room. You can use it as an online meeting. So you've got all the Office 365 features. Use them as a team to manage the governance for Office 365. So it's a really good way of kind of getting people talking together and sharing these ideas. So it's not a one-size-fits-all. It's very flexible, but hopefully will give you a good idea of kind of how to start that governance framework going and moving forward. So I'll hand back to Jonathan now, who'll kind of run through your Office 365 tips.
Thanks, Pip. Okay, so first tip is, we've already covered some of these, which is phase your Office 365 implementation by workload. So start with your identity and then workload by workload implement. And breaking this down even further, when you do this, we think it's a good idea to separate each of those workloads into two parts. So separate the implementation into a design part to get the design exactly right, and then the configuration or implementation or build part. So basically design and build, and we think that's a good recipe for success. Exploit Microsoft's free resources, that Fast Track Center who can do the onboarding work for you for certain workloads, and the funding where applicable. Absolutely crucial to address the issue of change management. But of course change management is going to be different for each of the workloads, and you'll have to tailor the change management according to the workload. So for example, an Exchange migration is going to require less change management than say Yammer, because people already use Exchange and Outlook for email, whereas Yammer is a completely new and potentially quite a risky solution to implement. So if you think about Yammer, what we see is that when Yammer is simply switched on and made available to people without change management, we see that there's a spike in usage as people enthusiastically pile in and start using it and talking to each other, and then we see that spike and then it tails off and diminishes to just a kind of a background level of activity. So the organization hasn't really exploited Yammer, hasn't got the full benefit of enterprise social, whereas where a full change management program is wrapped around the product, then the organization and people are going to get much greater value from using it. They know why they're using it, they know the reasons, they know how to use it, what's expected of them, what isn't, and they understand how they can use it as part of their everyday business working to add value and make them more productive and more effective. So it's very crucial that you do that. So you can see, think about other examples of, say, implementing an intranet using SharePoint, excuse me, then intranets require, again, good change management, because it helps people to understand what information they can obtain from the intranet, why they should be logging onto it every day, first thing in the morning, to find out what's going on, what's expected of them to contribute to the intranet and to comment, like or contribute content, and how they should be expected to work and can work with their colleagues, e.g. Collaborating on documents or contributing to ideas and projects. So without that guidance, then there's a risk that these tools just become another IT innovation that's exciting on day one, but then can just taper off. So it's absolutely crucial to include very well thought through change management to wrap around this technology. And lastly, last tip is use an experienced partner, because what they can do is help you to accelerate through the implementation and to de-risk the implementation so you can get it right the first time. So they provide technical expertise on the product, so they know exactly how they work. They know the map of the territory, which really is what is the roadmap likely to be, what are the pitfalls, and what are the opportunities to get it absolutely right, and they can help you to optimize the use of those Microsoft Fast Track resources, whether it be time or whether it be funding. So very high level tips, but we think these are absolutely vital, and where we see these followed, then we see successful implementations. So this is a recipe for success. So we're going to talk now about one of these examples. It's a customer of ours in the NHS, and Pip's going to talk us through that.
Thank you. So this is a client, unfortunately we can't name specifically who they are health related, and we're currently working on them on getting a public case study, but at the moment we're not allowed to name them, so I've just kind of listed them as being a public sector IT supplier. So they work in the NHS, specifically for health and social care area. They have 10 offices around the country with about 2,500 staff, and they work really closely with the Department of Health and with other health and social care organisations. So all the kind of the different NHS areas will kind of collaborate and communicate with the central organisation. And they have their own priorities. So they have kind of objectives that they're trying to achieve to try and get this ticked off. And that includes kind of reducing paperwork, making things more efficient, making sure an individual member of the public has kind of their information is secure but is easily shared where needed, so that everyone can kind of access it between the different health organisations as needed. So they came to us and they had a specific objective to have this big internal transformation, which kind of covered changing from a very siloed area where groups were resource pools, they were assigned to a specific area, and you might have two different pools of resources, and they were doing similar work, but as demand flexed. One might be sitting around twiddling the thumbs, while another is really maxed, and there was no real way of kind of sharing information, sharing resources, and so they were kind of being really held back. So they wanted to change how they were structured, how they were delivering work to their customers. Really trying to make it much more around a service model and better communication internally, much more open, transparent, so that if they did have a high demand in one area, they could use resources from another and change how they were working. So they worked with us, and we came up with a number of different areas for how we can review and rework it, all of which are going on in Office 365. So one of the underlying IT demands is that they get rid of servers, they reduce the internal kind of IT demands, so they can actually just work better for their customers instead of having extra areas internally. So they worked with us, and we built a vision to go over several phases of work and multiple solutions, all of which are based in the cloud, primarily in Office 365, that we are touching on as yours slightly, and then had that as a big roadmap. And within each solution and phase, we then went through a detailed discovery area, designing solution, evolving the requirements, and so on. Then we built the solution itself, and also supported them through the change management and kind of rollout, training and evolution internally. We then are continually going back around in each of those solutions, looking at further phases, further enhancements. Some need them, some don't, but it is a long-term plan for how to get it going. We're not suggesting all clients will work with this for this length of time and for this amount of work, but it shows how an organisation will have to kind of plan this and roll it out over a long period of time. So these guys are covering these workloads at the moment. So you can see that Exchange actually isn't part of their initial piece. Not saying it won't be in the future, but right now the primary three are Project CRM and SharePoint. But we're also doing Yammer, Dell, Video, and as I said, there's a little bit going on in Azure as well. When we rolled these out, they were definitely done in bundles. So Project and a little bit of SharePoint was initially, then we had SharePoint, Yammer, and Office 365 Video, then there was CRM coming on. So we did them kind of in pots and phases. So at a very high level, I tried to kind of make it nice and simple so people can understand it quite without going into too much detail. Sorry, jumping ahead. This is kind of how we phase it. So you can see we started working with them about a year ago when we did the initial overall strategy. So that was kind of our kick-off piece of how we're going to get them going, how we're going to work with them. Their primary kind of initial way of fixing how they worked was implementing Project Online. So a new project management system where they had resource management, timesheeting, where you can really kind of manage the supply and demand across all the resources for their customers. That was kind of the first one to kick off. We went almost straight from strategy into the discovery for that piece. While that kind of was being built and rolled out, we sorted out all the identity phase. As Jonathan was saying, that really needs to be the first thing that's finished and live. So we made sure we had that live before any of the other solutions went live. Then we kind of wrapped up the project management piece, got that live, and then support took on. So we started to manage them in a support area. Supports ran long term over the top. And as new solutions come on, we just kind of increase the support coverage that they need. That project management piece went live, I think was lovely, and then we looked at phase 2, and so we've kind of been working on phase 2, and that kind of rolled out quite recently. The next solution in this list was their call center application. This was primarily based around CRM. So we did the discovery for that, and then the initial phase 1 that went live at the end of last year. So that's all up and running. There's no immediate needs for an additional phase. That's kind of quite stable, so we've left that as it is. Their intranet is probably the more recent out of all of them. So we started that in the new year. We've done the discovery and we're getting close to getting live with their intranet. There will be phase 2 to follow quite closely afterwards. We're not quite there yet, but we imagine a phase 2 to kick off pretty quickly. Jumping down to the bottom, we did their innovation portal, so that was quite a small project we got live on SharePoint and Yammer. So that went in kind of in the beginning, end of last year, and they ran for a few months with it quite happily, and now we're looking at some enhancements and some changes to that. We're looking at phase 2 for that at the moment. But the one that I skipped was their medical records. So this is a really big one for them. It's a big system, very complex, going to hit a lot of people. So for that we've had, as you can see, we've had multiple phases, and it's kind of been a big part of what we're working on. So kind of lots of small phases, getting something live, up and running, testing it, seeing what's needed, changes and new features, enhancements, and then continue that cycle. So you can see how for one client's move to the cloud has actually covered a wide variety of products. It's taken a year, and we're still doing things, we're still evolving them. As I said, not everyone's going to be doing such kind of critical line of business solutions, but even so, you should be seeing something similar in terms of all the different kind of phases and rollouts and continually changing and tweaking and evolving. As a platform, it's perfectly designed to kind of allow that evolution of content and functionality, and really kind of take advantage of the new features. Hopefully that's given you a good idea of kind of how we work for our clients, and now we'll kind of wrap up and look at next steps.
And we've got a bunch of questions that come in as well, Pip, so we can cover those too. So quick summary. Again, we think this is so important, so implement workload by workload, product by product, don't do it all at once. Make use of those services from Microsoft, and funding where it's available, and those services for migration. Enlist the help of a partner to help you provide value add, advice, and to guide you through the whole process. And remember those important topics that we've just really skimmed over today. We could spend an hour covering each of those on a webinar. Perhaps we'll do that in the future. And governance and change management, absolutely vital. But if you were to meet us, we can talk you through those in more detail. Thinking about next steps, what you might like to do next, we suggest and invite you to go back to our website and look for the previous episodes of this webinar series. So the first one, the why, which is on there, the business case and the return on investment for Office 365, and the what, which is looking at the capabilities. Please feel free to ask us for a demonstration and workshop of Office 365. We can do this at your offices. We can meet at Microsoft in Reading or London, or you can come to our offices here at CPS in Marlow. And we can help you to take a free trial of Office 365 and guide you through that. And we have a special offer for you today, and there are some T's and C's on this one, but we are very happy to arrange to meet with you for a free workshop where we can help you plan Office 365 implementation and to give you a high-level strategy planning document as a result of that. So that's free of charge. Contact us if you're interested in taking up that offer. So thank you for your questions, and this is where I put Pip on the spot. She hasn't seen these as they come in. So here we go. So Pip, what is the best approach to implement CRM online? So
well, it's a difficult one because it's such a big product. It can cover your sales process and kind of opportunities and pipeline, but it can also be a case management system. It can be a service desk system. So it would really need to have a bit more conversation to find out what actually you're trying to achieve, what's the business goals you're trying to solve with it. And then following the phases that we've talked about. So two of the solutions for that case study I mentioned were based on CRM, the medical record and their call centre. So it would be a case of going through a discovery piece, designing it, rolling it out, and then making sure that you've got small phases and allow it to evolve over time.
Okay. But we basically follow the same approach of like design and build as we usually do. Can you explain more about identity and why that is so important?
Yeah, so it's a good question. So the identity piece, Office 365 itself has a number of different ways that you can authenticate. Typical trials and stuff just have cloud ID, so different login, different credentials to your local machine. That's fine for kind of trials and maybe small companies, but actually for a proper business, you really want it to be synchronized with your existing credentials. Most likely you're using AD. So the identity piece is really looking at how are you going to authenticate, how are people going to log in, what credentials are they going to be using. If it's going to be the same credentials as locally, then you need to set up your synchronization. So you really want to make sure that that's stable, it's planned for the future. Yes, you can change it in the future, but if you get it right first, you'll have it much smoother. So once you've got the identity set, all the other workloads will make use of it. So it will just kind of continually roll out all the other add-ons. So it's really, really important that that's right and working, and then everything else will kind of sit underneath it quite smoothly.
You haven't covered the Office 365 prerequisites, and this is something we said we would do, which is systems, people, and processes. So that's quite broad. Can you talk about skills? I think that's what that question is getting at. So what are the skills that a customer should have in-house to implement and support Office 365?
Big question. So the skills vary depending on the workloads. There will be some initial setups, so particularly around the identity, and probably things like Exchange migration. They're very IT focused. The IT side for Exchange will be usually people who already know Exchange. So there are some gotchas around kind of how Exchange Online runs, and that kind of comes back to suggesting you work with a partner. Some of the migrations and setups an organisation will only ever do once, whereas we do it time and time again. So we've got knowledge and experience that a company wouldn't have. Once it's up and running, however, then it's your normal skills that you'll have. So Exchange Online is usually managed by somebody who would manage Exchange on-premise. SharePoint is usually managed by somebody who would manage SharePoint on-premise. So it's the same sort of skills and setup. What you will need support with is the experience of having done it before, and obviously that's where a partner can help you.
Right, thanks, Pip. And the last question, what are the criteria for Microsoft funding? So you mentioned funding.
There's many different pots of funding, so it depends which ones you're referring to. There are some that are available purely on Microsoft's whim, so that will depend on the size, whether you're looking at competitors like Google or something like that. If you have enough cloud, enough kind of wiggle room, then Microsoft might give you funding just out of their that pot. There is other pots of funding, like Line to the Fast Track, that are purely based on the license you buy and when you buy it. So that's more kind of set funding. So at the moment, it kind of by over 50 licenses, any of the E-plans, Exchange Online, SharePoint Online, they all tick the box. There's quite a few that do, and you've got to buy the licenses by the end of June, and then you'll get some document funding through the Fast Track Centre. So there is so many different pots. Again, it's quite hard to answer. Maybe that's something we can take offline.
And that's something that we help our customers manage, is interfacing with Microsoft, so we can ask the right Microsoft people the right questions about obtaining funding, and then our counterparts within Microsoft can go and apply for some of this discretionary funding. Okay, that's good. So thank you very much. We've reached the end of the questions. We've reached the end of the webinar. Thank you very much for your time. If you have any questions and thoughts afterwards, please feel free to make contact with us if you'd like to take us up on the offer, if you'd like to meet with us, or just talk with us on the phone, here are our details. Please feel free to make contact, and we'd love to hear from you. But for now, thank you very much and goodbye.
Thank you. Bye.